You're talking about which one in particular?
Any of them. They were all great stories.
The one that impressed me was that Granddad had picked up a word of wisdom problem when he was young. I think he was like a lot of young people. He was a little bit rebellious when he was young. His dad was very strict, Carl Christian, but he used tobacco, and all the years that I knew him, he had used tobacco. So when he quit long enough to go on a mission, and when he came back, he started using tobacco again. And there were two stories that I got from my two aunts, his daughters, that concerning why he started using tobacco again. And one of them was Jimmy Frankham, a fellow who lived just across the street and down a few hundred feet from his, talked him into starting to the tobacco again. And the other one was that he was visiting up in Wyoming, and his his father-in-law offered him some tobacco, since the Germans all used tobacco, and he offered him some tobacco, and he said, "No," he says, "my wife wouldn't like that." And he said, "You gonna let a woman tell you what to do?" And so those were the two stories that I knew about my grandfather and his starting of the tobacco. But the thing that impressed me as I got older and realized that all the time I knew him, he always went to church. He always had the tobacco habit, and everybody knew it. They all called him Ferdy. Everybody knew he had a tobacco habit, so he couldn't talk in church, he couldn't hold positions in church, but he always went. Even when his wife was not able to go and he was sick or something, he always went to church. I didn't think about it much when I was younger, but when I got older, I realized that was a very exceptional that a person would go, knowing everybody knew that he was breaking the word of wisdom, but he still went to church. So it gave me a new perspective of the fact that he really had a testimony in spite of the fact that he had become addicted to tobacco.
And what was his full name?
Ferdinand Augustus Schramm.
And who else were his kids? Who were his children?
Okay. My father, Morton Schramm, was the oldest. He had three boys, Morton and Reed and Carl. And he had, his children were Ruby, Martha, Pauline, and am I forgetting anyone? At least those three daughters. And they worked on the farm just like the boys did. In fact, when I would go out to help Grandpa, Elsie was the youngest daughter. Elsie and Leona were still living at home, and we used to be out there in the beet field hoeing beets together quite a bit, and so I heard all the stories from both of those as well. Of course, they weren't so much about Grandpa as they tell stories about Leona, who was teaching school. Would take a vacation, and some of the school teachers, and they would travel down to Arizona or something. She had a car, and Elsie, she always took Elsie with them. I remember one time she said they were on a bus. I don't know where they were going then, but they had packed a lunch, and it was in the carrier above the seats, and apparently it was some probably tuna fish sandwiches, and apparently they started leaking through and dripping down, and so the school teachers started singing, "Elsie, Elsie," how does it go? The tune, can't remember which tune it was, but anyway, they'd sing that. Is that your sandwich dripping down on you? And So they had a good time, I think. And
Where was the farm?
the farm was just on the east side of the Petite Neat Hill. You went down the hill, and it was maybe a quarter of a mile east and maybe a quarter of a mile south of that. It was a farm that was started by his father, Carl Christian, and when Carl Christian died, it was left to the children, and he inherited part of it, and he ran part of it from one of his sisters who lived in Manti for years. In fact, he was still running it for her when I was a young man.
How big was it?
The farm, the section that belonged to his sister was 5 acres, and the area that he had, I would guess, maybe 10 to 15 acres, and a little bit of dry land up above the canal. The dry land was the area where you couldn't irrigate it. You had to depend on the rain, so they would usually plant fall wheat and hope for the spring rains and so forth to give enough water to mature the wheat. It was never as productive as irrigated land, but
That doesn't sound very big either. I was expecting hundreds of acres.
No, they were small farms.
Just enough to get by with, huh?
Yeah. But
tell the story about your ear.
the what?
Your ear. Didn't you have part of your ear bitten off?
Oh, it wasn't bitten off, but it was bit.